So obviously you saw the thumbnail and the title and you know, but you can also tell just from my shirt, I had to get a little matchy to celebrate the beautiful brand new palette from Nomad Cosmetics. This is the Okavango Safari palette, and I am very excited to use this. I have swatched it, so that's as far as I've gone yet. So the rest of it, the eye looks we're gonna do today, it's all gonna be first time doing it together. I am so incredibly blessed that Nomad sent this over in PR, and I do have a discount code. I just want to throw that out right away. To be honest, I don't get any kickbacks from the code, but I do have one and was gifted this palette. But let me tell you, I'm already gonna tell you right now, if I hadn't been sent this in PR, once I saw all of the beautiful colors, I would have snagged this one. 100%, I would have spent my money on this. So if you are not new to my channel and you know my vibe, you probably know that that was pretty much to be expected. I mean, look at this color story. I'm gonna be showing you close-ups in a little bit, but we do have these almost tipping into like mustardy, funky, orangey browns. We have this beautiful coppery tone. We have some nice grungy greens, all of the deepening shades that I ever need for the dimension that I want in my life, and I'm really excited to try this out. What we're gonna be doing together today is doing 2 eye looks, seeing the quality of this, and I have a lot of thoughts here. I will also be doing a comparison breakdown of some other palettes that are coming out recently, whether it's ones that I have or that I don't have. I just sort of want to give my vibe on it and, you know, kind of like compare and contrast. And then there were a couple shades in here that I thought might be similar to other shades in Nomad palettes, so I thought I would do comparisons of those as well. If you were like, I might have those shades, I will do that for you as well in this video. But if we haven't met before, my name is Kelly and I'm a professional hair and makeup artist, and here on my channel I strive to keep beauty real. Real honest, real relatable, and real fun. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, don't forget to click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Before we dive into looks and swatches and all of my thoughts, let's talk a little bit about this palette. So obviously I showed you this beautiful cover. Now, I was very surprised. I will say I have not watched any reviews on this. I know I'm kind of late to the game as always because shipping takes forever to get to me, but I do not watch any reviews before I do my own review. Not that I think that I would be swayed in any way, but I just want all of my thoughts to be pure and true and unadulterated, if you will. So I was surprised when I felt this, and it has that almost like faux suede feel. So it's very different for the brand, you know, something textural. I think this is very cute. I'm just a little concerned because it is not going to be wipe offable, if you will. If you get powder shadows on this, if you set it into an eyeliner smudge, that's going to be it. So I have a feeling that this is not going to stay looking as beautiful for as long. But, you know, that's sort of what happens. Beauty is high maintenance, right? I do also want to show you the beautiful packaging on this palette because I think that this is just lovely. I have to say, I almost wish, to me, what would have been really cool is to somehow incorporate this with the like animal print, like maybe the animal print around the outside and the beautiful like safari photo in the middle. I'm not sure, but that's just because I'm not one to keep boxes. Like if I have to take everything out of their packaging every single time, I'm just not going to take the time to do it. I do think it's beautiful. Nomad just really kills it with the color stories, always with like the theming, just everything is so well done if you're someone who likes that experience of, you know, feeling like you're on a journey when you are using your makeup. I do also have to say, I really appreciate the ethos of this brand. You know, everything from the shipping materials to obviously the packaging, even the fact I noticed that in this palette, did I already lose it? No, I did not. So in this palette, you have this little sheet of tissue paper as opposed to a sheet of plastic that went inside to protect the shadows. You know, obviously we're trying to like reduce our plastic footprint, right? So I really appreciate all of that. I just really do. I think that sometimes, you know, trying to be environmentally friendly can be really overwhelming, but sometimes it's just those small shifts, those small changes that we can make that really do make a big impact. I also really appreciate that every time Nomad does a release, they have a sponsored cause, if you will, that they do give back to as well. In this case, they are representing the Wilderness Wildlife Trust. So this helps protect majestic animals and the communities of the safari. So I think that that is really beautiful. You do get this little insert here on this card. That's what I was just reading off of, a little, you know, almost like postcard, if you will, with the details on this palette and, you know, sort of the inspiration behind it. So let's go ahead and take a peek. I did try to get some up close photos before I took swatches, because one of the things that is just so beautiful about these Nomad palettes is the embossing, and everybody talks about it. It's just very fun, very whimsical, really just kind of like gives you that like fun experience when you first use it. But of course, just like any embossings, they do go away. So I just want to give you some up close looks at this palette. I do just want to say, I think that this is such a well done color story. It seems simple at first glance, but it is so well balanced in having some warm tones. You have some of those grungy shades. You have a couple pops of color. You also have everything you need to make a beautiful smoky eye, even something that dives into the cool toned realm. So I think that this is just a palette that you could use for almost anything. There are not really, I mean, I think there's one shade in here that I would personally consider a duochrome. I don't think that the brand is calling it a duochrome, but I do feel like it has a bit of a duochromatic shift to it. So, you know, you're not going to get like super shifty shades, but you are going to get a beautiful color story and some gorgeous shimmers out of this. Now, I will say that the shimmers in the Nomad palettes recently have been somewhat unpredictable as far as the formulas go. You know, in the Verona Love and Death palette, there were some issues with hard panning and, you know, just some things that didn't hit the mark. And I think that's happened a couple times with the brand. So I was very excited to see when I first, you know, took a look at this palette. I was like, oh my gosh, I think we're going back to like what I loved about the Nomad shimmers. Those beautiful, like, textured in the way that the shimmer sits on the base of the shadow, not textured as in like flakies, but just something a little bit different. Very beautiful. The mattes, I mean, I was trying to think this morning, like as I was swatching these, have I ever had an issue with a Nomad matte? There might have been like one or two shades that I felt like needed just a little finessing, but overall they are just stunning, gorgeous, work really well, very easy for the average makeup user, and I think that that's really important. So I'm really excited to dive into this one, if you can't tell. So looking at the up close swatches, I did go row by row with these, and this first row really envelops that like warm tone vibes. I mean, that Leaping Lecheways shade, you had to know. If you know me, you had to know that I was like, ooh, so drawn to that, because again, there's something textural about these Nomad shimmers where it has a, you know, almost like nudie kind of coppery base, but there is this little bit of textural, I don't know how to explain it, because you see this very subtle hint of like a rosy shimmer. You see a little bit of maybe gold and silver fleck, but it's very, very fine. It's not like glitter. It's just little flecks of tone. So it's really multi-dimensional. I mean, oh, I don't even know if you're going to be able to see that on the back, but maybe you can even just there. Like, it has that rosy hue, but even when it's not in the light, it has more of that, like, you know, sort of like your average nude shade. So I think that this just has a lot of potential. Then of course we have the beautiful, more orangey based tones. And then that Pack of Wild Dogs was a shade that when I swatched it, I was like, ooh, this is so yummy in undertone. And I like the fact that a lot of these mattes have almost a very slight satin finish to them. They aren't chalky at all. They just look really gorgeous and almost like skin-like. You know, they just give that slightly buttery vibe, but they're not overly creamy, which to me means that they're just gonna blend really easily. For me, I don't want a matte that is so powdery and dusty that it's like blowing off into the wind, but also the creamier that you get, sometimes you can have more patchiness because it just tends to stick to the skin and it's harder to like spread, or sometimes they can just like keep spreading and spreading, especially if it's like a deeper tone, it can just kind of get overwhelming. So I think that these just really hit that sweet spot. So then, I mean, I haven't put them on the eyes yet, right? But just from swatches and just from previous Nomad launches, I guess I should say that. We will see once we put them on the Face. So then in the second row, we have this beautiful, like grungy vibe. And I think that this really hits that natural green tone. And you do have some brighter tones in here, but they aren't like neons. You know, it's different shades. I always love a good, you know, like that like funky kind of yellowy green. I will say on my skin, because I'm warm toned leaning into olive, it doesn't show up quite as, you know, like pea soup as it would on some people. I mean, I love the pea soup. I'm all about that vibe, but it doesn't show up that way as much on me as maybe it would someone who's more like neutral or cool. So this Keystone Termite shade is the one that I think has more of that like slight duochromatic vibe to it. It really has like a sandy gold, almost like leaning into a taupe that has a green shift to it. It's like all the things. I know I just basically said every color in the rainbow, I feel like, but it does have that little bit of like, I'm kind of gold and then I'm kind of green, and I have a little bit of like a neutral vibe going on. My pressure cooker's going off, please excuse that. And then of course, this green right here in the middle. So this is Vumbura Plains, and this shade. This shade gives me life. It's like that perfect kind of funky bright green that I really love. I think also, I did not mention it, but the few shades that have almost those like animal print shades. So you have the Nile Crocodile, and then the one above that was the Roaring Lions. And then when we get down to Migrating Zebras, they have that little print to them. I'm trying to see, I honestly, I mean, maybe not. Maybe it goes all the way into the pan, but I almost feel like the Nile Crocodile is almost like a bit more of an overspray in those flecks. I will ask on that. And then of course, this is just a beautiful, like very nature inspired green from Chief's Island. I think it is just beautiful. So this bottom row, this really is almost like neutral leaning cool. I mean, this is very like earthy, and you've got some browns in here, but they do lean a little bit cooler toned. This first shade here, Crash of Rhinos, this one has like almost like a cooler khaki vibe to it. Of course, Migrating Zebras, you can see that that comes up a very cool tone silver. Not a shade that I'm probably going to use a lot, but if you do love a good cool toned look, it's nice to have it in here because I think you get a beautiful, really fun smoky eye out of this. Then Rumbling Elephant. So I have to say, like in the release pictures that Nomad did, I was like, is that a green? Is it a gray? Is it a brown? Is it a black? Yes. Yes, it is. I really feel like this is a charcoal green gray. That's what I'm gonna say. Now, obviously I've got these like bright green nails, which probably is not gonna help the situation. So up next to my nails, it probably looks like just your regular charcoal, but I do feel like this has a bit of just like a sooty green base to it, which is gonna blend so well with all of these other shades. I think it just is that like subtle undertone. Now, Mighty Buffaloes is a beautiful like cocoa brown shade, but this definitely has some cool toned fleck to it. So you can see that it has that like little bit of like almost like a silver shimmer to it. So again, it's a beautiful neutral, but it does have a bit of a cool tone vibe to it. So to me, this Honking Hippos, again, it's almost like an ashy plum based brown. It's definitely more on the brown side, but when I really look at it, I get like a little bit of a ashy cool toned purple, just like a dab, just a little dab. So I think that this is just such a beautiful palette and I can't wait to dive in. So that's my thoughts on the color story. I think that, you know, sometimes in photos it can be really hard to see. So I think that it's also like, you know, every person's eye to eye. So I hope that that helped a little bit. Now we're going to dive into some looks. So for these looks, I think what I will do is something that's more of like a beautiful, neutral, you know, smoky eye, something that I know that will always look good. For me, that is something that is just quick. It goes with everything. And I think that, you know, for me, every time I do something like that, I'm like, oh yeah, really love this. I think I will also, of course, have to dive into some of these greens and make a bit more colorful look. Something that, you know, has a little bit more of a pop to it. Honestly, I think I could do like 5 looks in here and have something different every time. I think that this is just such a well-balanced color story so far before I used it, you know, jury's still out on that. Let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to zoom you in and I hope you enjoy the looks. Okay, here we go. I am probably just gonna keep this pretty short and sweet. I don't plan on doing any extra fancy techniques, but I will give you my thoughts as I go. And I do also wanna just note for those of you that are new here, usually when I'm first using a palette, I don't use any eye primer, or at least not on one eye, just so I can see. In my everyday, I usually just use a little bit of concealer, which is what I did. I did powder it a bit. So I will make sure, by the way, to leave everything that's on my face, other than this eyeshadow palette, down below. I will really try. I say that every time. I will really try. I just wanted to, you know, get this video as concise as possible because I do want to talk about some other palettes in case you were kind of looking and being like, oh my gosh, which of these should I get? Or should I get multiples? I don't know. Hopefully my thoughts will help you. So first we're going to go into our little neutral smoky eye. I am really excited. All right, so we're gonna go right into that Leaping Lechwe shade. Now this, I am having just a smidge of difficulty picking it up. I'm using a synthetic brush. I'm just going through with this Real Techniques brush. I am going to wet it. I pretty much wet almost all of my shimmers, and especially since I have my face on, I definitely don't wanna, I wanna minimize the fallout. You know how it goes. So we're just gonna try to pat this on. I do think you could use your fingers with these shimmers, absolutely. I also feel like, maybe not with this one, there is one shade in here that I would be worried that you'd get a bit of hard pan with. I do think that that's been something in a couple of Nomad's previous palettes that people have been having an issue with. So I will, you know, I will kind of keep an eye on that. I might, once I get this laid down with a brush, I might go through with a little bit more with my finger, but I don't think so. I'm always so nervous that I'm gonna get sparkle everywhere. I do also personally think that with a formula like this, I would probably get a better pickup with a natural haired brush. So maybe that's what I'll do on the other side, is I'll use all synthetic on this side and then natural on the other side, just so that we can kind of compare. So just kind of running this over the entire lid, and I'll probably go slightly above, but not too far above, just enough to kind of like get above my little hood there. Okay, I am getting just a bit of like separation on my eye from using this with a brush or using it wet, one of the two. It's like, I'm gonna use my finger. I'm just gonna go for it, and we'll see if we can kind of like smooth this out a little bit just with the warmth of the finger. Yeah, that's working better. So this might be a finger shade or a natural haired brush shade, or even like a synthetic, a silicone spatula might work, just to kind of like smooth the shade out. It wasn't flaky. It just was honestly almost like breaking up to show my skin underneath a bit more, if that makes any sense. But this is working pretty well. And maybe you can't tell, but I feel like you can sort of pick up that little bit of like, it has a bit of honey tone. It also has a bit of that like slight rosy tone. It's not a rose gold by any means, but it has that just ever so soft pink vibe to it. Very pretty. Okay, now I'm taking the BK Beauty A504 into that Pack of Wild Dog shade. That's that brown that I was really excited to use. And I'm just going to build the shape that I want first. So many of my brushes are dirty right now. Oh my gosh. And I just had to put a bunch more in my like wash bin, because the other day Jeremy was outside leaf blowing, I don't know, the entire world, just to like get the dust and the debris and just all the chaos. Like we have so many trees that they like shed these little, I don't even know, like fronds. I don't even know what to say, but ugh, it was just everywhere, and pollen was everywhere, except my window was open in here. And so there was just like a fine layer of gritty, granular dust everywhere. And I was like, yep, every makeup brush that was kind of like sitting out close to the window needs to be washed. Ugh, like, so yeah, I've got a lot of washing to do basically, but I'm definitely running low on my brushes. But I do really like this brush because, as you can see, I could place it and then just kind of like blend it out to create a beautiful, like seamless blend. And this is why I am all about the small brushes. I think even if you have a larger eye shape, sometimes it's just nice to have those smaller brushes. You can always build more, but you know, it's hard to like rein it back in. So team small brush all the way. Team brush, not team fingers, and team small brush all the way. I mean, I could stop right here. I could stop right here and go ahead and whack on some mascara, be out the door with no problem. I really like this. But of course, we're not going to stop there. I think I'm just going to use this same brush, and we're going to dip into Honking Hippos. That's more of that like almost like plummy based brown, and I'm going to use that in the outer corner here. I mean, this is by no means a out there unique eyeshadow look. Like this is kind of like your basic bitch smoky-ish eye. But I'm here for it. And I think, you know, I think a lot of us are. I think a lot of us are ready for, you know, maybe slightly more low maintenance makeup, something that we just know will always look good. And this is that for me for sure. Okay, so since that color sort of like cooled down the outside of the eye look, I think what I'm going to do to tie that in is take that Mighty Buffalo shade. That is that shimmery kind of like cocoa color that has those flecks of silver in it. And let's see, what should we take? Let's go ahead and take the BK Beauty 204 brush, that's smudger brush, I believe is what it's called. And I'm just going to smudge that right under my lash line. I have been kind of digging on the shimmery lower lash line recently. It's sort of like retro vibes, you know, like I haven't done that for a while, but I am really enjoying it. Oh yeah, I like this. And I am going to take a little bit of that and just dab it on the outer corner on the top too, just to kind of like blend it. Now the only thing is that there really is not a light bright inner corner in a neutral zone for me to use. And that's okay. I'm gonna just pull out my companion palette. This is a build your own palette that I created last month, something like that. But anyway, I will make sure to have that video linked down below in case you wanna see it. It's definitely something that I recommend doing if you are a singles lover or you just happen to have some singles on hand. This has really come in clutch a lot of times. So let's see, what am I gonna take here? I have the shade Fragile in here from Pretties for Your Face. So I'm gonna pop that on my inner corner. I mean, obviously you could also, if you enjoy wearing face highlight, you could totally just pop a little bit of face highlight on the inner corner as well. I'm not doing that today. I just threw on bronzer, and then like right before I started filming, I was like, oh, maybe I'll just pop like a little bit of blush on. But yesterday, Jeremy and I were out kayaking for the first time of the season, and so I definitely got some sun. And I was like, you know what? I'm okay living this like somewhat naked skin life with just a little bit of bronzer to sort of like celebrate the fact that I got some vitamin D. So I'm just gonna blend this out, and then I will go ahead and throw on some mascara. All right, here is the first look done. I mean, hello. I mean, this is just your pretty basic glam makeup done really well and very easily. So I did go ahead and put on some mascara. I did throw on a lash. I'm using the Lashes Baby Lash from Moxie Lash. How many times can you say lash in one sentence? A lot, evidently 3. So I do really like these. It's just like a, I would say, you know, 2/3 lash or like a half lash, just to kind of like draw out that outer corner for me, give it a little bit of lift. I really enjoy this look. The only thing for me was the fact that I did have to use my finger to smooth out that lid shade. Not a huge deal though. Didn't really get a lot of fallout. I did, of course, you know, I need a little cleanup on aisle 7 because my finger cut down on the lower lash line, but other than that, it was fine. Really very, very minimal fallout. So I just love this. I mean, is it anything that you couldn't get from other palettes? Probably not, but it all worked really, really well. And sometimes that's just really what saves the day. Okay, so now we're gonna do something with a little bit of green on this side, a little bit of color. Okay, as I'd mentioned, I'm gonna go through with natural haired brushes on this side. I'm going through with my very trusty, very old Wayne Goss number 18. Wayne doesn't make this brush anymore, but I'm gonna go through and use that Keystone Termite shade. That is that one that is almost like a subtle duochromatic, you know, kind of like natural earthen brown with green kind of vibe. And I'm just gonna lay that all over the lid. This one definitely picked up better on a natural haired brush than this one did with a synthetic. I am gonna take my finger and just smooth this over to see if I just get, you know, a little bit more polish out of this eyeshadow. Can you even tell a difference in that? I do feel like I'm just getting a bit of a textured look from this, and I do think it's just from that like micro fleck that is in the Nomad shimmers. It's not bad. It's not like Danessa Myricks Infinite Chrome Flakes. It's not like that. It just does have a little bit of texture. You're not gonna get like a Sydney Grace molten wet metal. You're gonna get 50% of that and then 50% like little like flecky sparkle texture. Okay, with the Rephr 14, I'm gonna take that brighter green and we're gonna pop this on the inner portion of the crease. I think I'm gonna take that Nile Crocodile shade as my inner corner. So this brightness, this like, you know, kind of like funky green is going to help tie that in, I think. I'm hoping anyway. And then after cleaning that brush off, I'm gonna go through with Elusive Leopards. This is more of that like warm toned orangey brown vibe, just to really get some like color contrast going here. I wanna see how deep I can get this shade. Oh yeah, we've got a nice color pop here. Okay, and partially just because I can and I wanna use more colors, I'm gonna take that Moremi Game Reserve. It's kind of that, you know, like I was saying, it's sort of like a funky pea soup shade, and I'm gonna use that just above both of these shades, just to sort of like tie everything together. I think if you have an olive undertoned skin, I think that this is gonna be such a beautiful palette to use. Like the undertones are just gonna really suit you really well. Oh, by the way, this is the Wayne Goss 19, just in case you were curious. Okay, now with the Rephr 26, I'm taking that Rumbling Elephants. That's that greeny charcoal. And that's gonna be what I use as my deepening shade. I'm gonna take that Elusive Leopard shade, that orangey one, and bring it up just a little more. I feel like I lost it a little bit. Okay, I think I'm gonna do another shimmer on the bottom. I'm gonna go through with this Roaring Lions down on the bottom and then use Nile Crocodile as my inner corner. And then I feel like we've gotten a good bit of these shades in. For 2 looks, I'm feeling pretty happy about that. All right, so starting out on the inner corner with that Nile Crocodile shade, I am just using this dry. By the way, there's something about on the inner corner I do not like. Usually I do not like the look of a wet shadow. It tends to just get, with a lighter shadow, I don't know, it just sometimes gets this like metallic paint. It just looks like paint and it's harder to like blend out. There's just something, it's just an aesthetic thing for me. But this shade, ooh, this is beautiful. I don't know that I would necessarily use it on the inner corner normally, and I like went ham. I'm talking to you and I'm just like, I'm going for it. So I think I'm gonna do that like through the bottom third of this, and then we'll go through with that beautiful coppery shade. Ooh, I have some regrets. I have regrets, not on the look, but by not wetting my brush, I got a lot of sparkle fallout from that Nile Crocodile shade. Like my nose is, it looks like Tinkerbell sat on my nose. So be warned that if you are using these dry, you will probably get some fallout. So I normally, like when using something like this, I would probably do this without my complexion on first. I would do the eyes and then go ahead with the complexion, but that's not what I did today. I did just want to say the nice thing about some of these like swirled shades is if you are just using a very tiny pencil brush, you could kind of try to pick up, you know, one or the other of the colors. Like in the Roaring Lions shade, you have a coppery brown and then you have like that orange shade. And then same in Migrating Zebras, you could either take the white or the like more charcoal shade. But, you know, obviously you have to be pretty delicate with that. I think it would be easier in the Zebra than it would be in the Roaring Lions. But I'm just kind of like giving a little, I'm just trying to marry them together. They're all gonna have a party. Okay, come on. This is totally me. This is so me. I would maybe like something just a little bit lighter here on the very, very inner corner. Other than that, this is so fun. I cannot wait to use all of these shimmers on the lid. They are just gorgeous. I mean, this copper shade down here, this Roaring Lion shade, this will be going on my lids for summer. Like just give me all of the molten, like beachy vibes. I love this shade as well. It's almost like tipping into like a little bit of chartreuse. Definitely have to give that one its time in the sun too. But it was that Keystone Termite shade that just had that like grungy vibe to it that I had to get on the eyeball. Again, I don't think it's a shade that is completely unique. I think that there are other shades similar to this out there, but it is very pretty to have in this palette. So now I think I'm gonna find a green eyeliner, do that, mascara, lashes, and we'll get to see the 2 final looks. All right, so before I zoomed out, I just wanted to give you a chance to see this with the lashes and everything on. I do just love a good half lash moment. Like it just is just enough to kind of perk up a look. I love it. I do think also I put this one a little lower, but that's fine, that's fine. I'm not going anywhere, but I did just want to show you. Honestly, I love both of these looks. This is exactly what I was hoping to be able to get out of this palette, is a little bit of a grungy vibe, but something that blends out very easily, is very wearable, if you will, you know, something that you could just get a wash of color if you want, or build it up, make it more dramatic. And then of course, just like your beautiful basic warm tone. And like I said, I do think you could get a beautiful cool toned look out of that bottom row. It's just not something that I go for an all cool toned vibe, but I did like being able to enhance this a little bit with that. All right, so now I'm gonna zoom you out, give you a little comparison to the other Nomad palettes that I have, the couple shades that I wanted to swatch side by side for you. And then of course we'll chit chat comparing this to a lot of the other launches that are coming out, because I feel like this is a vibe. I feel like this is a vibe for summer 23 and I'm here for it, but I do think that there are a lot of choices and hopefully this will help you narrow it down. All right, I hope that you found those looks helpful. Let me know which you prefer. Do you like something that has a little bit of that like grungy vibe, or are you here for the like classic warm tone smoky eye? I like them both. I really, really do. This is totally my vibe. It really is. So that being said, I do love this palette. Now, I didn't use all of the shades in this palette by any means. I mean, I could have thrown Towering Giraffes into this look, but just telling from the swatches, it's gonna be a fine matte. There are so many more looks I'm gonna be able to get out of this palette, and I'm really looking forward to that. So yes, I am definitely glad to have this. If I hadn't gotten it sent in PR, would I have bought it? Yes. Would I have enjoyed it and had any regrets? Respectfully, yes, I would have enjoyed it. No, I wouldn't have had any regrets. That was really confusing. So I would say, I would definitely give this my stamp of approval and recommendation if you feel like this is a color story that you're going to enjoy, and probably also if you are someone that is going to wet your brush, or you are going to go through and do your eyes first. I personally do think with most of these shades, if you use these dry, you are going to get some sparkle fallout. So that is the one thing about this, is I do think that you get a little bit of that, but that's also what just kind of gives you that shimmery magic. I mean, even just from far away right now, I feel like this shade is picking up the light so beautifully, and it's because of those little reflex. So, you know, that's the thing for me. I think that this is lovely. If I could tweak anything about this, I mean, I see why this is in here. It's going to be a beautiful like blending shade. If you are just looking for like one color on the lid and a color in your crease, this is going to be nice for lighter toned skin tones. And then you could use this one or this one if you're deeper skinned. But if you're a deeper skinned, this one is not going to really do much for you. So could I maybe have seen this one, like one of these? I mean, I love this shade. So I could have seen this one taken out and put in a lighter pop for a shimmer that isn't, I mean, even this shade is like too dark to use as an inner corner. I'm just not seeing anything other than this that really works for that like inner corner. That being said, it's not a big deal. We all have other shades that we can pull out. Is there anything else? Honestly, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think that this is beautiful. I have a feeling this is going to get like a little mucky eventually. That's the only thing about this, but I do think it's different. It's unique. I like the feel of this. It just feels kind of fun and luxe. And for $42, by the way, I probably should have mentioned the price of this palette. Wow, is this my first YouTube video? No. Yeah, it's $42 at full price. You can use a code like mine, which is KEEPBEAUTYREAL, to save you 10%. There are a lot of codes out there. Please don't feel that you have to use mine. It does, of course, you know, help me out in letting Nomad know that you are enjoying my content and it's helpful to you, but I don't get any kickbacks off it. So just make sure you use a code so that you can save a few bucks. So now let's take a look at some of the comparison palettes here. So I pulled out a few that I right away was like, ooh, I need to do some investigation. So I think all of these other ones that I'm going to be talking to you about today are ones that I have spent my own money on. I have received a couple palettes from Nomad in PR, but these ones I spent my own money on. So right away, let's take a look at Hudson Valley. So I'm gonna say that these two are gonna make a beautiful mega fall palette. I mean, look at that. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited because this palette only has the 3 shimmers in it, so you do get much more like shimmer power in here, and I think that they're gonna combine really well. I don't necessarily think you're gonna have any dupes for each other in here. They do have a bit different vibe because Hudson Valley on the one side leans more into like the red-orange vibe, and then the other colors are more murky. They're more of that like slightly grayed out feel. The only thing is the 2 browns in here, I don't think that they're gonna be the same, but they are fairly close. I think you see more of a green tone vibe in the Hudson Valley Farm to Table, whereas like I said, that Honking Hippos does have a little bit more of that like plummy, cool toned thing going on. That's what I see anyway. Other than that, I think they're different enough here. Everything is just like, at least like one off, a little clip off. So I don't feel like there's anything in here to compare, but I did just want to show these side by side because I think that they pair really well. So if you liked your Hudson Valley palette, but you maybe want some more shimmers, this would be a great pairing. Now let's take a look at America's Parks. So this was, I think this was my first Nomad palette that I got. So America's Parks has a little bit of a similar vibe in some of the shimmers, and then it also has, you know, some greens, but it's definitely a different color story here. So I think that this has a bit more of a bright feel, whereas this definitely has, you know, like just a little bit more, even more natural tones, if that makes any sense. Now, of course, the one thing that really stood out to me in here is the coppery toned shimmer. These are pretty darn close. Wow, okay. All right, so here we have the shade in America's Parks. This is Delicate Arch, and then this is the one from the new palette. So, ooh, they are very, very similar. Sorry, I'm like looking in the viewfinder just to take a peek. I can see that the Leaping Leshway has a bit more of that rosy tone, whereas the Delicate Arch has a bit more gold tone to it. But they are very similar. On the eye, you're just gonna see a tiny bit more of that like rosy copper, but just like a tiny bit. So if that's the shade that's drawing you to the palette, like it's drawn me in, if you have the other palette, if you have America's Parks, I don't think that you necessarily need to get it unless you're like drawn into the other colors. But if that's the only reason, I wouldn't get that one. So really taking a good look at this palette, that is the only shade in here that I think really like matches up, but it matches up almost perfectly. The other thing that I thought of was like, ooh, isn't this shimmery brown shade in the Whistler Snow Lodge palette? And it's not, because if I take, oh my gosh, I'm just getting covered. I'm just getting covered in sparkles. I mean, there are worse things, right? But it's definitely becoming a hot mess situation. I don't know if you'll even, oh yeah, you can definitely tell here. So in the Whistler Snow Lodge palette, you have So Amused, and that one has more of a gold shimmer and reflect. And the one in the Okavango, which is Mighty Buffalo, is more of that cool tone. You can definitely see that there, like it's shimmering in the light. This is the So Amused, and this is Mighty Buffalo. So it's almost like cocoa with some pewter shimmer to it, whereas this one has more of that like neutral leaning into the gold shimmer vibe there. So do we have anything else? I mean, this obviously has like much more cool tone to it. Again, the brown is going to be a bit different. It's a much more cool toned brown. And to me, that's really it. That's the only thing that even like strikes a similar chord. So I think that that's going to be it for the comparisons here. So what I also wanted to talk about is all of the new palettes that are coming out that have a similar vibe. I think that there are a lot of them. Of course, right away, a lot of people think of the new Natasha Denona palette, right? All right, I just zoomed you out a little bit so that we could like put a little comparison up here of the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. So I definitely think that there are similar vibes here. And I know that this is the one that a lot of people are like, oh, this seems very, very similar. To me, I feel like this has more pop to it. It has more of that like bright feel from the greens, and also even like, I don't know, there's just something that's a little bit more, I don't even want to say dusty, like dirty. There's a little bit more dirtiness to the Natasha Denona one. It's a little bit more like khakied out. Like it has a little bit of like a sepia filter on it. I don't know, that's just me. Are there some similarities? Sure. I also feel like it just depends on what kind of shimmers you like. I think that the textural shimmer that is in these, some people will really, really love. I think that some people also will not enjoy it, because I don't think that there's any of that in the Natasha Denonas. They're going to be more of your like straightforward Natasha Denona formula. Like I was saying, you know, before I was talking about the mattes, and you know, Natasha has her cream to powders and her creamy mattes, and sometimes those formulas can be hard for people who are just starting out. And you think like, well, it's so super blendable. How could that be? I really just think, especially with like deeper shades, sometimes they just like go way too far, or they start to get a little patchier because they are so, they're not damp, but a little bit, you know, and it's like, you just can't quite blend out quite as well. So I have a feeling that this is just going to be a much more easy to use matte formula than the Natasha Denona in a way. They're both blendable. And I know everybody's like, oh, they're so easy to use. Natasha Denona shades like blend themselves. Sometimes they can be a little bit difficult. Also, let's look at the price difference. I mean, we are talking $42 versus $69, and you can always find a discount code for Nomad. Natasha Denona, not as much. The one thing that gets me about the Natasha Denona palette is the cooler toned eyeshadow that's in that palette is still kind of a brown pewter, whereas like this shade is, I mean, it is a straight up like silver, you know? So honestly, this is one that I probably will very rarely use it. Like I just don't see myself. It's almost like blue toned. That's just not my vibe as much. And that might not be everybody, you know, and a lot of people might be like, thank God, this color is going to contrast and I can't wait to use it with some of these other shades. So that could totally be a thing. It's just not my thing. So that's like the one thing about this palette that maybe I should have put that in the things that I would change about this. I would like maybe make that just a little bit different, but I get it's totally like in that zebra vibe. So let's talk about a palette that I first thought of right away when I saw this, and it's a palette that I chose not to get right now, so I was kind of excited to get a little bit of that flavor from this one, and that is the Odin's Eye palette, which I need to go look the name up of. Okay, so this one is the Stone and Rock, I do believe. Stone and Rock. The Jewels and Gem is the one with the more blues, and the Stone and Rock is the one with the greens. If I got that wrong, I'll notate it down here, but this, again, it's not like a dead ringer by any means, but The Nomad Cosmetics palette has even more warmth and even more like of that like pea soup to it. Whereas the Odin's Eye one has almost like a little bit more like jade influence to it. So it's got some cooler tone blue greens and just cooler tone mattes in general with a little bit of pop of that warmth. I like both. I like both. I think for me that the Odin's Eye one is more of like a winter vibes or like fall leaning into winter, whereas this one, just with those warm, yummy tones, it just screams like summer into fall. So I guess it just kind of depends. However, if you are cooler toned in your skin tone or you love wearing cooler toned clothing and you want something that sort of like matches with that and complements that, maybe the Odin's Eye is the way to go. And let's see, pricing on this. Okay, so these palettes are a little bit less expensive. They are $35.90 each. So, you know, I mean, a little bit of a price difference, but not quite that much. You're talking about like $7. And I know that Odin's Eye has discount codes out there as well that you could use. So that's kind of like, you know, sort of like apples to apples. So that to me just really is about like whatever floats your boat as far as if you like something with a cooler tone nudge or if you want something with a warmer tone. But it did give me that little bit of feel of like earth tones, you know, more of that like neutrals, naturals with a pop of color. All right, so now to compare it to one palette that I have in my collection right now is the Ace Beauty Tropical Vibes. So here's Ace Beauty and here is the Nomad Cosmetics. So you can tell Ace Beauty has a lot more saturation in tone. It's much brighter and vibrant. You do have, you know, some of those murky tones, but this is just like, it's much softer. It's like definitely like safari, like found in nature. Well, I guess some of these can be found in nature too, but kind of like different sides of the planet. You know what I'm saying? So the other thing for me is the formula in these shimmers. These are that putty, smushy, creases on me, even though I don't have oily eyelids, but I do have hooded eyelids kind of vibe. That's one thing about this. Whereas these shimmers last on me all day long. Now, if you love much more kick in the pants, if you want like even more pop in your like slightly neutral, but with a lot of color, you might like the Ace Beauty because these mattes, you know, you really do have like quite a bit more punch to them, but you don't have as many of the neutral browns as you do in here. So yes, there's a little bit of a similarity here, but there's not as much. I think that this is like, if you like this, but you're sort of like, it's a little too quote unquote boring for me. I want something that's like a little bit more adventurous. You might like this one as long as the shimmer formula works on you, which it doesn't on me, which is a shame because honestly, other than maybe on my inner corner, I won't be using these shimmers anymore. I've just tried it. I've tried it with everything and they crease, crease, crease. By the time I get to work, I'm a creasy mess. So I hope that that's helpful. That's just like a little rumination on what's out there. I do also think, you know, some of the palettes like Melt Gemini, you know, that definitely has that vibe. There are quite a few palettes that have a little bit of this sort of like earthy meets grungy. So before you decide to go and purchase this, maybe just take a look through what you have, think on the formulations, and think on, you know, if there are times that you're just like, gosh, I really wish this palette had a little bit of this in it. And if Nomad fits that bill for you, I 100% recommend this palette. I love this palette. I'm gonna get a lot of use out of this. Like I said, I don't think that anything in here is something that you can't find somewhere else. There isn't really a unique shade in here, but they are all beautiful and they performed wonderfully and they're all in one spot for me. So this is gonna be a very quick and easy grab and go palette. It's gonna be coming out into my Shop My Stash for summertime for sure, which by the way, I probably need to do a summertime Shop My Stash video. Coming soon. This one's gonna be in there for sure. All right, I hope that that was helpful. If it was, please go ahead and give this video a like. It really does help me out. Again, you can use my code KEEPBEAUTYREAL to save 10%. If you have any other questions, or if there's a palette that you think is very similar to this that I missed, leave it down in the comments so that, you know, everybody here in the community can kind of check that out and check their stash as well. All right, lovelies, that's gonna be it for today, and I will see you really soon.